Hi there. Welcome to my broadcast. Today's topic is what are the current topics that are keeping the CEOs that I work with in my business practice up at night? What are the things that are top of the mind? What are the challenges that we are facing collectively? My objective of this broadcast is to help other CEOs and executives who are facing similar issues not feel alone, to feel that there are other people who are dealing with them and to offer some solutions that we know of. Sometimes there are no solutions. Sometimes it's a question of empathy. And perhaps by hearing that other people are suffering through the same things or finding solutions or happily winning, you may find that you're not alone. As you guys know, I'm building another Vistage group for CEOs. My objective is to offer this experience firsthand to as many people as I can. And so this is my way of sharing that wealth. So let's start. So my name is Tomas Tomasevic, and I'm a Vistage chair here in Seattle. I work with two Vistage groups. One is key executives, the other one is CEO groups, and I'm building a third one. I have been a Vistage chair for a number of years. Most of you know me from my previous broadcasts. Today, we're going to go to a number of topics that I have identified as relevant. Again, my criteria is explained, and so we'll start down. So clearly, top of the mind topic, and you may roll your eyes with it, and I don't blame you for it, is the COVID fatigue. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that motivation is the first one that suffers. In other words, because of the same old, and all of the challenges that we are dealing with the current pandemic, as well as the anger and frustration that we are experiencing, the first thing that suffers with any level employee, including CEOs, is a sense of purpose and motivation. Now, most of the people need to be heard. Most of the people need to feel that they are understood, that somebody cares, and that oftentimes is good enough for them to get into the state of balance, where they can actually find their own solutions to get out of the state of demotivated existence. What do I mean by that? Well, it's not the first time that we have dealt with difficulty. You know, in the last 20 years, we had quite a few traumatic experiences that have thrown us off. This one has been lasting a little bit longer, no doubt. But we know how to cope with lack of motivation. We know how to cope with depression. We know how to motivate others. So let's remind ourselves of a few of those things. So first of all, need to remind ourselves that in a happy body, there is a happy mind, or in a healthy body, there is a healthy mind, which means we need to take care of ourselves. And we need to encourage others to take care of themselves, which means taking breaks, which means allowing ourselves to have happy moments in our life, and primarily to have good exercise, good sleep, and good nutrition. So if you have been slacking on any of those things, giving yourself a little bit of happiness, a little bit of care, self-love, or if you have not been extending that to your team, you know, the fatigue is to be expected, and the fatigue is going to continue. So what are the recommendations that I have? Well, first, take care of yourself. So first, take care of yourself, because your energy is going to be affecting others, and your energy is the only thing that you can actually offer and manage, which means make sure that you are respectfully handling your body and your mind. Exercise is important, just so that we can burn all of the toxins in our body. Food is important, of course, because some food are known to be depressive. And of course, sleep is the most important. Sleep is the time when we recuperate and heal. So make sure that you have those three fundamental parts of your body needs taken care of. Beyond that, what can we do for us and others? Well, first thing that I would suggest is stay away from depressing news. You know, if you're going to watch something, if you need entertainment, look at things that are helping you grow. Look at the things that are making you happy. Look at the things that are useful to you. But stay away from the doomsdayers that are telling us that things are not going to be better and that we are angry at each other, because frankly, that's not helping. So what does that mean? Well, offer that help to the others. Offer them motivation through positivity, or empathy, or showing that you care and that you're there for them, even if they're not ready to receive help, right? Show them that you care. When you take care of yourself, the fatigue will start to cease. I see that fatigue affects me as everybody else, and clearly in this north part of the country, and I'm in Seattle, we have shorter days, grayer mornings, and earlier nights, and that affects everyone. And of course, without mistake, it will affect all of us. Not to the same extent, of course. So, but this is not new. This has been true forever, and so this part of the year is darker for us, and it doesn't mean that the darker days are coming. It just means that we have this season that is going to be a little bit colder, a little bit darker, and with gray skies, and we know it. And this is the time for us to rest emotionally, physically, etc., and survive through it. So all of you who live in this northern climate should know that now is the time that we can actually do certain things that frankly we're too busy to do during our short, bright, wonderful summer. So let's try to do that. Let's make sure that we pace ourselves. Let's make sure that we're ready for the holidays, and let's stay in a positive spirit. No less relevant than that is a discussion about second topic of today, which is the national division that we're seeing. I'm not going to deep dive into that one. I will acknowledge that it exists, and I will recommend it that we try to find a way in our hearts and in our minds to keep an open mind, to love the people for who they are and come to the place where they are, to accept them for their mistakes, even when we disagree with them. Or should I say not mistakes? Well, they can feel like mistakes, but let's accept them for their beliefs, even if they're different than ours. Not everything is politically based. But because we're internally angry and tired, we are self-protective. And a self-protective person tends to be unpleasant towards the others because they're protecting themselves. So much of our division is coming from the fact that we are tired. Much of our division comes from the fact that we think differently and we have lost the ability to empathize. And somewhere along the way, we have let the politics take over and tell us how to do it. So stay away from that if you can. It's my call to action. Try to go back to the respect and love for the people that you have around you, because they deserve it. You know it. You have given them that love. You have given them that respect. If you disagree on some kind of an issue, consider it to be a minor issue. It for sure is not something that would deserve that you lose their love and respect. Enough about those two things. So, what are the things that are currently present that we care about? So the third topic is the economy of the 2020 and 2021. So those of you who have seen my previous broadcast, we have discussed in May, earlier this year, what is the state of the 2021 economy. And we have spoken about what was coming, which was inflation, supply chain, huge demand, low supply, and all these functions that come along with it. So all of this stuff was expected and it is materializing. The question is if it is going to continue and what do we need to do about it? So we can see at this point that the demand caused to a great extent by the pent-up demand from the 2020, as well as the decrease in capacity in so many different ways during the 2020 shutdowns. We are seeing that just more people are ready to make the purchases, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 10% of higher number of purchases overload the optimized supply channel, as you guys know, making it impossible for us to get our goods to import our stuff to the ports, to deliver things to the trucks and things like that. In addition to the supply chain issue, clearly we're having an issue with our employment availability. In other words, with the employees, we are having about 30% of the workforce missing in action, and that can be root cause to a whole bunch of things. Some of them that many people are in transition, some of them that are struggling with the fatigue from COVID and are withholding themselves from the workforce. Some of them that are choosing to change jobs because the demand is higher than the number of employees, etc., etc. So we're seeing that essentially we're having pressure from many different ways. So the dysfunction of the supply chain, dysfunction of the demand and supply, etc., continues. So is it going to continue into 2022? And the answer is most likely yes. So what are the things that we need to expect? Well, we need to expect that the demand will outpace the supply, which will further inflate the prices of the goods that we are either receiving or selling. Next thing that we can expect is we will continue to fight for the workforce. In other words, the workforce is short in supply, and you guys know firsthand that it's not easy to hire, and that is again another reason why there is inflation of the wages. Additionally, we are seeing that some of the supply chain items, whether you're looking at the worst case, which is the semiconductors, or lighter cases, the supply chain is so obstructed or so behind schedule that lead times are long. So whether they are 3 months or for 50 weeks, like in semiconductor industry, we are going to be seeing, in other words, continuation of the current situation into the next year. So what does that mean for us? Well, first of all, it's call to action, at least in a few different things. If you can optimize your production, whether it's services, whether it is products, whether it is any kind of delivery that we are dealing with today, or anything else that is part of the supply chain or outside, any optimization within your company will help. Very few industries are not affected by the current situation, and even if you're not affected as a business, you're probably affected as an individual. So optimizing your planning. In other words, if you are thinking of the Christmas season, personally, think about ordering stuff early. If you think about sending any of the goods abroad or importing something abroad, give it more time. This is going to continue. So what does that mean? It means that we're going to have a constraint either at the front or at the back of our production, delivery of services, customer satisfaction, timelines, speed of delivery, etc. That, in a sense, means that our optimization can come from few different areas. One area is optimizing our processes, making sure that we're as effective as we can be. So looking into the microscopic processes that make us faster in delivery, more lean, etc., that may be relevant to whatever your business is about, to make sure that you guys can be more effective in doing it. I'm limitedly, or should I say, only partially optimistic about that aspect, because we had many years in the past of optimizing our processes. So I don't know what is left to optimize in many cases. But in most cases, there is something small that can be optimized, and that something small accumulated with a few other small things can be a relevant thing. So in other words, optimization is number one. Second thing is open communication with our upstream and downstream vendors, partners, customers, etc. What does that mean? Well, you depend at this point probably on some kind of a supply chain system, whether it's a workflow system, whether it is anything else. Looking at it from the perspective of, it is not important if only I survive, because survival of one link in the whole chain is going to be relevant. So expanding yourself to understand how your other links in the chain working, whether those are vendors above the key chain upstream from you, or if they are downstream from you, having frequent and open discussions about the state of union, and making sure that we are aware of what are their needs, because only together can we survive. There is this tendency that we have right now to isolate and to turn into little turtles, and that's simply hurting us. So engaging with our suppliers and our vendors, our customers, our partners, our peers is relevant, because transparency is something that's going to help us to plan together stronger. Now, of course, you don't need to be crazy about it and go and reveal anything that you shouldn't. However, knowing what is the state of the vendors upstream, downstreams will tell you how much you can rely on them in the future. Many of the products that are being supplied to the companies that I work with are on constraint, meaning that they can't get, my customers can't get 100% of the materials they need to produce everything they want. That means that they're on allocation. So if this is a situation that you're seeing, and that allocation may not exist specifically in your company, but it's up or down the chain, you need to be aware so you can optimize and not expect too much. Expect exactly the right amount and be ready to deliver it. Now, this may give you a headache, and you may say, well, I can only produce 60% of stuff, but my costs are still the same, and that is true. So what does that mean? That means that this is going to probably increase our prices. So taking a look at the prices, first of all, we know that inflation currently in the country is roughly 5.5%, 6%. And that means that if your prices have not increased by that number, you need to take a look at your profit margins. If your profit margins are suffering, the question is, what is the elasticity of your pricing? The elasticity is measured in a sense with how much can you increase your prices and how many people, how many customers you would lose. For example, zero elasticity would mean that if you raise 10% your prices, you would lose 10% or more of your customers, which means effectively your income will decrease. Lack of stronger elasticity means that you can increase your prices, but you would not equal attrition of customers. So that is something that I can't recommend anybody specifically because it depends on your business and your industry. However, looking into it is very relevant, and being brave at this point is very relevant. Why is that? Well, we haven't dealt with inflation of prices for a very long time. Last time was the mid-80s. Few people that are currently active have been active then as executives. Consequently, this is a new way of thinking that we have to focus on and we have to drive towards. And the problem in that will be change. We need to adjust to the change. So what does this mean? With the companies that I'm working with, my suggestion is if you are dealing with this gross profit or EBITDA or whatever your way of measuring your profits, if you're seeing compression in that respect, it is a question, of course, of raising of your costs of doing goods or cost of selling goods, as well as your cost of workforce, as well as the upward pressure, which is your prices to stay constant and not change. And that is probably not sustainable for most of the industries. I wonder for which it would be sustainable. And I have seen increases in prices in construction-related industry upwards of 45% year to year, this year alone. Some cases less than that. In some cases, people in charge say that they are contractually obliged to hold on to the contracts. They do not have escalations. They can't change the prices. They will lose the customers. And though I understand the legal implications of what I'm saying, I think that needs to be reviewed because we are not in the 2020 and prior economy. We are in an inflationary economy. Consequently, looking at your prices, your contracts, and whatnot is relevant ASAP, as well as being transparent with the people that are probably experiencing increase in their costs as well, and maybe depending where you are in the chain of your supply, you may be able to renegotiate things because it is nobody's interest for you to go out of business because you are forced to deliver at the prices in which you're losing money. So nothing is impossible. Everything is possible. The question is just, are you brave enough to try it, to start it, and to deal with it? Those that have, in my group of companies that I work with, are experiencing significantly above normal GP, gross profit. In many cases, they are measurably higher as number of couple of or more percent in GP at this point, trending for the year. In some cases, they're double. And so why is that? Well, because if you have an allocated number of products you can sell and your demand for your products or services is higher, first thing that you need to do is look at who are your customers that you are making most money with. Who are the customers that are the best long-term opportunity for you to stick with? Who are the customers that are willing and needing your product the most, etc., etc. In other words, looking at whether you are making the best income you can is a relevant aspect. Certainly, how can I say, a capitalistic way of looking at things, but a necessity. Why is that? Well, if you're working with the industries that are shrinking due to all this, your market will go away. If you're dealing with customers who are not handling their internal efficiency as well as others, they may cease to exist. So knowing how your supply system, how your support system works is very relevant, and that requires some level of reality. This is going to be very uncomfortable for many executives who are not used to price changes. This is certainly going to be uncomfortable to your sales teams. However, it's necessary, and the necessity is undeniable. If you take a look at what is the amount of price increases that are standard in your industry, and you can get that information by looking deeply, you can see whether your products are following the industry. An example of looking at it is looking at the cost of constructions. What is the increase in prices? In other words, bids that have been issued in January, how are they holding if they're implemented right now? And the price is significant, and in different parts of the country it's different. In some cases it's 100% higher. So that 100% constitutes the cost of labor, the cost of goods and materials, as well as delays that are related to the all of the permitting and everything else. So if you think that the end customer is balking at that, you will be surprised. In most cases, they are not. They are acknowledging that the price that their cost is going up. They are agreeing to it, and now the question is whether your products that may be part of that supply chain are having the relatively appropriate amount of increases, being that some of the things are higher and some of the lower. As we know, steel, iron, aluminum, and other raw materials are increasing at over 100% rate. Our labor is increasing certainly at a significant rate. Some of the elements of supply chains are not increasing, and if you're in that area, your percentage of relevance relative to the business and the budget are decreasing. So you need to take a look at that. Enough said about that. So if you take a look at the price increases, what is the other thing that drive our prices? And that is the cost of labor. And you may say, well, no, I haven't raised any average labor cost to my workforce. Well, if you haven't this year, that to an extent is a risk. It is a risk because we all know that to hire new people, we need to pay more than what we are paying our existing people. And at some point, that delta is going to be significant enough to become a motivator for existing employees to move on. And so what does that mean? Well, that means with every price increase that we actually fight for and succeed to have, we need to think about how do we pass that to our employees as a percentage increase on the annual basis or quarterly basis or even monthly basis. In other words, the only way for us to protect ourselves from becoming unattractive as employers when it comes down to pay specifically is to make sure that we are having the acknowledge the inflation. Acknowledge the inflation at this point is roughly 6% or so, and take a look at where it's going to go. It may go higher or lower. We don't know that yet. And essentially respond, because your employees at some point will have an opportunity to make more than the difference in hiring. What we are seeing in hiring is that many of the positions that are being offered are offered not at beginning of the year level plus 6%, but at the beginning of the year level plus 12%. And I think that stands as the logic, because people who are joining a company would like to make sure that they are covered for the next year with their that much higher inflationary markup. So if they are getting 6% more, that is just keeping them at the level where they were in January because of the decrease in the value of the dollar. Additional 6% will secure them for the next year if the inflation remains at the 6%. So oftentimes we see that people to hire new people are offering premiums relative to what they were offering in January, and that poses a risk, both for us to hire new people because it's becoming extremely expensive, as well as to lose our people because they will be able to go somewhere else. So if we are not keeping up our baseline for wages at the same level as what the inflation is, we are creating an opportunity for our people to be tempted with the offers they can get elsewhere, because wherever it is that they are looking elsewhere, the demand is high, the supply is low, people will be offering more. So just a piece of warning, think about that. So what are the things that we need to do? We need to find a more frequent, periodic way of transparently raising prices, which essentially is going to allow our customers to adjust their situation, order early to avoid the price increase, etc., etc. So it is a system that works actually for everyone, and it's necessary. And the second thing is to benefit from that income in our gross profit line. However, not forget that increase fundamentally needs to be passed on as well to our employees, because that's the only way for us to be equally balanced. So in other words, what is going to happen is that our incomes will go up, the GPs will probably stay roughly the same. So for the more money that we make, we will be paying more employees. And that's simply the cycle in which we're in. I hope this is not too hard to stomach. That is basically expected to continue to 2022. No big changes as far as what we can see. The money that government is pumping into the economy is going to be felt. And that essentially, what does it mean? It means that the abundance of money is going to mean that the value of money is decreasing. So in relative dollars, that means that the numbers will be going up for the same value, which means all of the prices, all of the wages, all of the costs are going to be increasing, and we'll need to basically participate in that system with full understanding that our actions will be causing inflation itself. Because when we raise our prices, when we reward our people with more, that effectively is adding to the whole concept of inflation. But at this point, there is no way to go around it. Next topic is how do we deal with stimulus money, and what effect is that going to have on the economy? And that is a big question. It's something that we're discussing. I don't have the specific answers. I have specific ideas and concerns. And if we are going to see this money that is going into the infrastructure in the environment in which we are already constrained with the workforce, is that going to help? And the answer is probably not, as far as the workforce goes. As far as the supplies, if we are already constrained on the work in the supply chain, will additional investment into the infrastructure help? And the answer is probably not likely. It is simply going to increase the demand. But in the same time, that poses an opportunity for us to continue doing what we're doing, which is raise our prices, plan accordingly, optimize our systems, and participate in the inflationary world, because that's where we are. So those are some of the topics that have come up in our meetings. The other topics that we oftentimes discuss in our meetings are reflections. What have we learned in the last 18 months? Are our employees in good state of mind? What is coming? What are the things that we can expect? So I'll basically just conclude with two things that we are expecting, and we'll discuss more in the future. The first one is the upcoming tax changes that are proposed by the current government, and they are relevant to be kept known of, because they may impact some transfer taxes. Transfer taxes mean that essentially when you sell your business or any asset, you will incur some taxes. That is kind of part of the spirit of this proposed tax change. I think that tax proposal has lost some amount of wind from under its wings, but it's still there. So observing that and seeing it is going to clarify itself in about a month. So hopefully by the beginning of December, we will know where it stands, though that needs to be taken with a little bit of salt. And the second thing is this private sector mandate for vaccination and for testing. So today is 11/4. It is expected that this will be official on 11/5. Just a quick reflection on that. So basically the mandate that has been offered by the Congress and by the OSHA is about 100 plus employee companies that are mandated to either make sure that their employees are vaccinated or that they are tested. There are exceptions to the vaccination. However, there is no exception to testing. So the testing will need to be carried on. The current state of facts in that specific area, based on today's information, and please forgive me if this changes, but based on the unpublished document that is called COVID Vaccination and Testing Emergency Temporary Standard, published on the Federal Register. It's the RIN 1218 AD 2042. Essentially, that is something that I think the OSHA is going to base everything on. It basically says that the cost of compliance with ACT and OSHA standards are part of doing business, which means that vaccination and the like will be probably burden on the employers. OSHA finds it inappropriate to impose employers to pay any testing cost. Employers can't pass that testing cost onto the employees if they choose not to be vaccinated. So the whole document discusses even some of the things about how do we treat people who have been sick of COVID, so they have natural immunization. Is that different? And they're not having any answers in that respect. So they're really just differentiating between vaccinated and unvaccinated at this point. Let's take a look at the questions that how we're going to implement this, or how are they expecting us to implement this, is any employee that is having contact within the 7 days worth of work week with customers or with other people, other employees, is considered to be subject for this testing or vaccination. The vaccination itself will be, there is a small description of what it is. It needs to be an approved type of vaccination under the emergency use authorization. It's an FDA. It needs to be administered in accordance with instruction, and they're actually making a little bit of an open statement there that you can use the self-read or self-administered test. The only thing is that your employees cannot be the ones who either self-administer and self-read. They can just do one or the other. So in other words, probably it's going to be appropriate if you decide to use the self-testing methods, which seem to be approved, is that an employee can administer it, but you need to read the results, and that needs to be done on a weekly basis. So there is more to it. If you go to the osha.gov, you can basically take a look at the latest information. Another interesting aspect here is, for those of you who are in Washington, Oregon, or California, it is expected that those 3 states and other states that have regional chapters or state chapters of OSHA, they will have a little bit of a leeway to implement their stuff at a later date. That later date is roughly a month after OSHA declares their own rules. And those rules cannot be less than OSHA's rules. So, but that does give a little bit of time for us to both understand and communicate this stuff internally. I do not condone or resist this ordinance. I think it is certainly outside of my ability to influence. It is a rule that we need to understand and act accordingly, and the system gives us some amount of flexibility in understanding certain things like what is testing, how is it implemented, who bears the cost, and things like that. So maybe it's not as bad as we worried that it would be, but it isn't as it is not optional. So that is what I close today's discussion with. Feel free to drop me some comments and ask questions. My email is thomas@t2team.com. I also have a Vistage address that you will get if you end up working with me in that capacity. I look forward to being in touch with you. Those of you who are interested in learning more about Vistage and everything else where I gather this information, and my peer groups of CEOs and executives that where we discuss this stuff, feel free to reach out. I look forward to hearing from you, and see you in the next episode of this show. Bye.